Welcome, Mike.
Dmitry, how are you doing today? Good to be here.
We had opportunity to have a mini interview at IAPA in Orlando this year. It was awesome, and what really stood out for me was the depth of experience you and your friend Phil had when we had this conversation. And it's decades spent inside projects that most people only experience as a customers. You spent 25 years at Disneyland as a technical director. Is that correct?
Yes, 25 years in a Disneyland resort in Anaheim, California. So the granddaddy of all theme parks. I had an amazing kickstart to my career path there. And I know we'll get into a lot of this further down the road as we discussed. But yeah, you're correct. It's amazing.
Mike, looking back, what part of that evolution do you think people outside the industry completely underestimate?
It's interesting because our guests, our audiences will use that word, expect it to be a show that they paid for or they showed up for. They drove miles and miles for. And from our side, it's got to be flawless. So what is that underestimation? The first thing is for us, always safety. Safety is paramount, reliability. These systems are designed with that in mind through engineering analysis, from human interaction to ensuring that the system will not tear itself apart. And of course, we're always looking for failure modes and interaction within the systems themselves, because one thing does look at another as we're looking at the big pieces of it all. You look at invisible technology, for example, the safety systems, once again, behind these automated systems. And even from that point, it's even the projection systems, it's the lasers, it's the lighting, it's all this becomes layers into our palette that we use as artists. Even from a technical side, we're artists. And we want to make sure it all interlays properly and works seamlessly. So it does look easy when our guests actually see the show itself at the end of the day. And that's where we find it to be very, very important to keep it smooth. And then, of course, the big thing is for us also catching our guests off guard. There's a lot of rinse repeat in the industry in our world. It's entertainment. We are somewhat limited, but yet we also want to push the envelopes, which we'll talk about later in our conversation of how can we push it to the next level. And that's what's really cool. But of course, by pushing next level creates risk. And risk is what we actually thrive off of because that's where you actually push it and go, we did it. And that's just really great. So there's a lot to it. And I know during our conversation today, we're going to really dive more and digest this and really talk more about the intricacies behind all these systems and how do they work to, once again, step back to your question, how do they underestimate? What do we do? So we are the unsung heroes in the technical world. And that's what's really great about everything that we do.
At IAPA, you talked about upgrading legacy control systems, taking attractions that were originally built on fully analog logic and then transitioning them into modern digital networked environment. What makes upgrading an existing iconic attraction harder than building something completely brand new?
Yeah, I think that's a great one because analog, you're using voltage. You're 0 to 10, 0 to 12 volts. That's your feedback into the solid logic controllers that we have. Now, by going digital, we are actually upgrading a lot more than just that. So it's adaptability where we're not replacing a shoe for another shoe, but more times there are more elements downstream, mechanical, hydraulic, electrical, that need to be re-engineered to adapt to the new control interfaces. Because now we get to hold on to more opportunity for digital feedback, which is eyes and zeros, ones and zeros throughout a whole stream. And that really allows us to then look at how does the system function? Can we make it a smoother hydraulic system? Can we make it a more accurate location of the system itself, be it a lift or a fountain or whatever it might be? And we also then provide more feedback to help the operating team that when something does fall, what is causing the fall? How do we solve the fall? And so there's definitely downstream. It's not a tear out the analog controller and put in a digital controller because there's so much more to it now. Like I said before, it's definitely now looking at the controllers on hydraulic valves where we get more feedback. And that's what really allows us to also then do more maintenance opportunities too, because it shares that data with us. Our analytics as maintenance and operators really streamlines and shortens the downtime. For anything we do from an attraction to a show, you don't want downtime because that's hundreds of guests being dissatisfied over hours and or if not thousands of guests dissatisfied that the fact they missed a 25-minute show that they waited 4.5 hours for along a river. So that's where it's very important for us to be able to look at this and really tear it apart through the process.
How often you had a situation where there was a poor design and you enrolled something and it started working, but then you realized, man, it's not working well, it's keep breaking, and you had to come back and redo it, redesign.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the examples, that we did was we thought we had a really well put together program for this massive table lift system that basically spanned the width of a football field, 100 yards. And it was based upon pneumatics, buoyancy. And we all thought that, okay, we have our loads distributed properly amongst these tables, that when we go to raise them up out of the water, they'll all rise up properly, level, and plumb. But the reality was not the case, because air likes to do what air likes to do, and it's going to find the lightest spot and things will start shifting. Just then, the air is going to go out so that suddenly this surface begins to shift and you offload it. We realized that's not going to work. And we learned that within the first 24 hours of our sadly, not sadly, you learn through failure. You learn through experience, and where you realize, okay, we need to actually go more digital, more tightly controlled of how does this thing float itself. It has to self-buoyance itself, not just rely upon weights and balances. So we had to put in sensors. We had to put in exhaust valves and intake valves to help this thing balance itself naturally. Now, it's not as simple as it sounds, because now your control system has to be upgraded to take all that input output digital IO, since digital is on and off, that's all it is, and then talk to those valves to then create the system to then support itself and balance what it needs to do at the end of the day. And that was the biggest challenge that we had. It was I don't want to say a fast aha, but it was a painful aha. But it's one of those you kind of go, okay, we realize this will never sustain the next 25 years of its life.
And wherever you describe this upgrade, it sounds expensive.
Expensive. It's time, which leads to manpower, which obviously leads to more inputs, which leads towards more parts. And of course, how do we do it with this thing floating in the water, more or less? And the experience on this one was basically, how do we run cables in a submerged thing already to the surfaces? It was quite the task. I had the pleasure of leading that team in the water with them as well in November in California. Not warm. The water was 50 some odd degrees. We had to buy dry suits, and we had a team, about 15 of us, who had to swim for hours a day and pulling wires. We had a team on top of the surface, putting sticks in the water so we know where to go to run the wires to, and back to what we had as underwater electrical rooms. It's quite the experience.
Let me ask you, how do you quote that kind of project? Because this is major project. Because if something goes wrong, it can go over budget immediately and it can bankrupt company.
Yeah. So from this one, this was a substantial capital investment. There was a substantial contingency plan. But, from our minds, we don't think about, oh, we got contingency, we'll solve it. You can't. And that's where communication and transparency comes in key with your leaders, your producer, and communications always has to happen. And at a point, you're already committed. So you have to take that bite. You have to move forward with the project and what it is, because you have no other result other than failure. And that's really not where this project will ever go. So you have to continue to push on it the whole time. And it's a tricky thing. It hurts. Sometimes people like to hold back on decisions where they don't know until they see it. Other times you have to take the pain up front and just say, we know this is a risk right now. Let's go ahead and just bite the bullet and go for it.
You mentioned contingency. In a contract, it says that success contingent upon something.
No, it's a good one, because any project I ever do, you carry a 8 to 10 or 12% contingency based upon risk. That's built into your budget. So you know that, hey, look, we've captured the proper costs for the project itself. We know that there's once again 8 to 10, depending on what it is, it could be a 15% contingency. And in the event of these situations, at least it's in the budget. So it makes going back to the financial team and our stakeholders a little bit easier to ask for that additional money, because we have it. However, that's not an endless pot of money that go, oops, we messed up again. And this is where I really want to get into some of the questions in a few seconds about prototyping and really growing into what the items are, so we can make sure we budget properly and accordingly. So there's money there, but yet we really don't want to ever dip into contingency until it's a big deal. And for this situation, it was a big, big deal, because we are literally adjusting the foundation for this system, and it had to be plumb. It had to be level 0 to Earth gravity, or else it wouldn't function.
So you have to always think about what if.
Yeah, what ifs. That's always the big one right there. And I think that's the one thing right there. There's always top of mind thoughts that we want to go. If it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. And for what we were doing for this project, it was inventing. I don't want to say every day, because that makes it sound like we're kind of kicking the soccer ball around the field and making it up. But that's not the case. There's years of work before this even showed up on site to plan for everything. There's a process that we use a lot. It's called the DAHA, DAHA, Design Assurance Hazard Analysis. The first part, design assurance. What does that mean? That means we're going to design something. We're going to create a criteria, I should say first. This thing must fit within this criteria. It has to go up and down in so much time. It needs to do left and right. What a X, Y, Z, put in your criteria. And then from there, you look at the next phase of it, hazard analysis. This is the big one that always catches a lot of people off guard after the fact. Well, I thought about it, the sync go up and down, but now let's look at the hazards. This is where I talk about safety. I really haven't talked about safety as we started this conversation because we were talking blue sky, top of the project. Now with hazard analysis, we're now applying the design assurance components with hazard analysis components where the HA does look at all the risks. Is it mechanical risk, human factor risk, facility risk, unknown risk? And this is where we get all of our specialists on board. So we have a lot of smart people on these projects that we all do, from structural engineers to electrical engineers to control engineers to systems engineers, all these, and safety, even our safety team members we bring on board from industrial safety. They're super important because these are the ones, and this is the hard part. I will not lie. This is the hardest part. These processes, you think you've got it captured, you think you're good, then someone shows up to the meeting that Monday morning and punches a hole right through your entire theory. And you have to come back and reply to that and go, we'll think about that and get back to you. You have to address those issues. But end of the day, it does save lives. It does save injury. It does save damage to a system that's millions and millions of dollars of value. It's an okay, proper process to follow. It just hurts at the time of the moment when you thought you got it all, but you never do.
How long proposal stage lasts for this kind of projects?
Yeah, no, projects like these, magnitude, scalability, it could be 2 or 3 years from a design. You can break it into phases. You take a project and do initial concept in full years, 2 years maybe. After that, proposal to vendors to do design work, break it into another phase. Then the next phase, you got your design, it's done. It'll just skip really quickly through the process behind it because it's a very long, drawn out process. And then from there, you get into the next phase of bid it out for fabrication. So they take the design, there's your fabrication, then you get to installation, commissioning, and then finally programming, then opening. So that whole process for what we're talking about right now was about a 5 to 7 year process.
When you get paid, because you don't know if you're going to be hired, right? Because I'm assuming there is at least probably a few other potential people who do similar work that you do.
Yeah.
And if it takes you a year to plan, but you even don't know if you're going to get the contract, how do you pay your bills during this time?
It's a tough one. And that's the toughest thing that I've worked with vendors on many times. As a client, from my flip the coin to my Disney side for a moment, we built and provided a very tight schedule that allows the bidders to see the phases. And within that scope document and RFP request for procurement, within there are milestones, and those milestones when payment occurs. And so we're working through that process as well and spilling it all out for them. So they're very much aware of what to expect, and they can work on their manage their cash flow as a vendor. And it also helps us out too. When as a client, you also are behest to the financial team so they can forecast their cash flow. And for this project in particular, it's a lot of money every quarter or every month that's going out, and finance needs to know what's going on so they can forecast that to their upper management team as well. So there's a lot to it. And this is where scope of documents really are critical because you want to be a partner as the client and as the vendor. You want to make sure you have a very good relationship so they understand when to expect X, Y, and Z and when the billables happen. And in the event of a let's call, we'll say, on the vendor's part or on the client's part, there's communication. So that's where the lawyers come into play and really help make sure it is watertight all the way through to protect both parties. It's not an adversarial relationship, it's a complementary relationship. And that's very important for everybody to remember during these projects. It'll get heated. It'll get tough at times. There'll be some very tough phone calls to be had. I've had them, but you find a way to work through it together because we all have one goal: deliver this amazing product.
During our IAPA conversation, something really stuck with me. You said everything you do is a prototype. What does that actually mean in a practice?
I love this question. It's a great one. It's so true. I think my favorite word is, we invent every day. The tools for us to work with exist. It's how do you want to use the tools? And when we realize the fact it's not a series of uneducated guesses, but it's a series of educated attempts with equipment and figure out how do you make these tools work together. For example, you want to do mapping of some system. 3D 3D items that are moving in a 3D space, and you're video mapping on it, or you're shooting lasers on it, or you're projecting upon it. All the systems are slowly adapting towards it all. And that's an invention right there. You're taking what's existing. You might find a hole. I need a widget to bridge a gap between item A and item C. That's going to be item B. And we work with our vendors. My prime case was for a great big Christmas tree I had, 60-foot fake Christmas tree, fully imaged. I forgot the number of pixel points within it, but it was ridiculous. We had to cut the tree in half, so to speak, visually, so we could map it because we just literally ran out of ability. And we had to reach out to a vendor of ours to help create dimmers to work with the LED twinkle lights that weren't just, I don't want to say off the shelf, that really waters down what it was. But this vendor who's world renowned in the world of electrical control, I mean, he can bend electrical waves like no one's business, and really build these dimmers cards to talk to each one of those individual strands because we didn't know what else to do. We had challenges. We thought we nailed it, but we were wrong. And the vendor helped us get through it all.
Mm.
So definitely prototype, it is that because we're always inventing. You know, if you sit there and just go, well, this piece and put it together, all right, sure. But you know, what breaks us apart from other groups and other people is the fact that we do push an envelope and find a solution for a problem that you find impossible, but still very possible to fix.
How does that affects timelines like budgets and expectations? Because again, you don't know what you don't know until you try it.
Yep, that's why I go back to my favorite word, contingency. Project managers cringe when they hear that, hear us going, we need to start looking at contingency. But there's always some sort of setback when you invent stuff. It's just what it is. You know, I mean, to look at all the systems in the world today of things that are happening, you can't reach up to the bookshelf, up book A and go automation, something I do because everything is so specific and unique that we're going to have to go with, you know, what the change is. Is it a schedule? Is it a cost? And do you have to change creative expectation perhaps with the creative team? As long as you set them up for those potential opportunities, obviously opportunities when you have an effect on the budget of the program, but you know, they'll think ways around it. As long as you bring a compelling case to the table to talk to your creatives, they'll listen to you. It's just when you don't have a proper answer.
When you're talking to owners, what's the biggest mistake they usually make or assume that immersive technology is just plug and play?
Yeah. In our world today, nothing's plug and play. I think, you know, I mentioned this earlier. A lot of the technology is on the shelf. You can grab a lot of bits and bobs that will really work really nicely. But you'll always find a gap someplace where you'll need to put something in the middle of it all. Back to my Christmas tree analogy that we talked about a little bit ago. You look at, you know, what's the intermediary system we need to put into place to cohese all the data from GPS to lighting control systems to ride systems of positioning that's digital within a track. And all those turns into now custom programming because whatever your backend is that that's running your system will then really require programming that's customized again. You can't just open up the door and grab me a GPS to DMX converter. It doesn't exist. So you have to go find the proper protocols, which they exist. They're very simple to do, but you need the right people, the right talent, and of course, the right hardware components to help bridge those gaps. At the end of the day, it's not plug and play anymore. There's so many good opportunities.
Yeah. Another topic we kind of touched at IAPA, era of AI.
Mm.
So tell me, what does AI actually add value in attractions today?
AI is the weird one. You know, it's definitely the buzzword of, we'll call it 2025, and really now it'd be 2026. Big buzzword for this year for our attractions. But those who are looking at AI for 27, 28, they're a little bit behind the curve already because that development needs to happen yet last year. But what does it mean for our attractions today? You know, AI relies upon the cameras, the infrared cameras, LiDAR, all kinds of tracking, sensing opportunities, but also your phone, your smartphone. A lot of companies in 25 relied upon you to bring your smartphone with you, connect via Bluetooth, connect via something, and it would then track you through this experience that you're going through. Well, that's great. The companies are now begin to realize the fact that, wait, our guests have their face in their phone the whole time, following this AI thing and this tracking thing, and they're not opening up and seeing what's around them. We spend millions of dollars to create beautiful rooms with scenery and interactivity. So now it's the whole fact of, okay, put your phone back in your pocket. Now walk through the room. So how do we do that? That's where the systems for AI need to come into play in terms of looking at facial recognition, body positioning. You know, fine, blank out your face and just before a physical body, and we're not looking at a face. But if it wants facial expressions to make something smile back at you, You need something to pick up on those things. So that's really where AI is going to be going now, I think, in the next year, a couple of years for that matter, because how does technology enhance the story and how does technology distract from the story? So that supports what I was just talking about a few moments ago, that fine line of balance. And there's no single line answer, but it's a case by case. And that's what's going to be the tricky thing for the industry in the next couple of years.
You mentioned some powerful advice at IAPA to younger professionals trying to break into this industry. Why is being a generalist so important for technical leadership roles?
And the word is leadership. And leadership's a multifaceted thing. The first round of it is being technically adept. I don't expect any technical director to know it all. I expect them to be able to have conversations with the specialists. You bring in specialists for a reason. They are the ones who get into the weeds of calling out the widgets, the parts, the pieces, interactivity between systems. But you, as a technical director, you need to be able to speak the language and to at least comprehend what they're saying. So, first of all, our beloved specialists don't, snowball you and put too many widgets in the way. You realize, why is this thing costing me $100,000? Well, I wanted this, I wanted that, I wanted this, and make it better, make it cooler because, we're gearheads. That's a fair thing to do. However, gearheads do self-sabotage at a certain point and put so much into the system where now you're actually adding layers of potential failure or a system complexity that's just unnecessary. So at least you can have that conversation with them and keep things within the scope of the project itself. I mean, we've all owned victim to it. There's some cool things. I get a little geeky at times. Go, no, let's do one little bit here, one more bit there. And then you realize that just caused more complexity than we really care to have. So that's what's going to be a generalist. So you have these comprehend the conversation you're having with all your specialists. You want to hang the hat on the specialist. It's really, really important. The second thing is being a generalist, you want the hands-on experience. You want to serve in those roles as well at certain times in your career path as you're growing. If you're an audio-minded person, chase it. If you're a lighting strong person, chase it. Mechanical, automation, whatever. Chase those roles. That's fair. But then be able to pull yourself out a little bit more so and zoom out and get above the clouds. So, look, as a technical director, your role is to be above the clouds. You're looking for the next pitfall ahead of the team so you can help curve off the challenges that will then get you later if you're not careful. So it's important to be a generalist because the next layer of this is you go to, I'll just roll right into the next question is, project management. Super important right there. You're taking a technical role where we are super tech savvy and can do a lot of really cool things. But you have to bring in the next level of stuff is project management. You got to bring in diplomacy. You have to be corporate depending on your client. You have to look at schedule and budgets. And of course, working on the safety components as well. It's a big piece of it all, and this is where a generalist with a blend of corporate strategy and synergy comes into play that really propels you as a technical director.
And you have to have different skills as diplomacy, corporate scheduling, budgeting. How do you get the skills? So tell us a little bit more about your background that lead you to the position where you at today.
When I was a young little dude, as new feet in the ground, oh, Mike, you have to learn how to type better. You have to learn how to articulate your words in an email better. You have to articulate. And I'll never need that. And realizing as you grow, you won't learn overnight. And you just can't open up the book of diplomacy or corporate or anything like that. You'll find the ways because each corporation is different and what they want and how they want things presented. But at the same point, you also want to be able to, work with those team members and really cohese with them because it's trust. This is all about trust. You don't want to break the trust. You want to build the trust. And so, it's so important to just, be able to learn this. And that's a skill set you won't learn in school. You'll only learn this skill set in the field, hands on, project to project. I'm 30 plus years in the industry and I'm learning every day still. So you can't have a closed eye.
Yep, that's a good advice.
It's so true, though.
You mentioned you work with a lot of specialists. Are they part of your full-time team, or are they just specialists that you hire on the side just for specific project?
So depending on where the project's at and what it is, it could have an in-house team or it could go for an external team. When I say team, it's assembly of multiple different people from different companies, their own individual companies, just like mine is Entertainment and Technical Solutions, consultancies that come in and bring that expertise to the project itself. Other larger corporations in the theme parks, they have internal team members and support staff that are on call. When I say on call, they'll be assigned a project and they'll run that project to ground, supporting the technical director that's already within that company's superstructure, so to speak, for production. So it really depends on what we're doing and who's the client and obviously what do they have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Speaking directly to owners and operators listening right now, what's something you wish owners would bring technical teams into earlier?
That's the biggest question. I love this one. It's always a question that comes up every time. It is actually making sure the technical producer, technical director is brought in on day one to begin the conversations with creatives, the producer, the project manager, because this is where we begin to either say, or we go, no, really, this is a good idea, but let's do this more. And how do you plus it up? And that's the big thing I find always so great. I was really excited to work on a couple cruise ships of recent time where we were brought in day one and really work in the venue and go, how does this venue evolve into something that's really technically feasible, but pushes the wow of what we wanted to do and pushes the envelope to give more. And that's where it's very exciting because we get to collaborate with creative and those team members. Sometimes, sadly, more than not, the technical team doesn't get involved until many moons down the road, where it's, I don't say too late, but it's a little more creatives already got their heart hung on something and you really don't want to burst their creative bubble. However, you have to find that reality between budget, time, feasibility, and whatnot.
If the owner has to do priority between
Mhm.
budget and where to cut the corners, what would you say? What would be the suggestion? What to cut corners on and what's not?
Well, I think safety is the first and foremost thing. We obviously want to make sure nobody gets hurt. That's the biggest rule, of what we do. Secondarily, it is hitting the creative ticks for this project. Third, budget. Fourth, schedule. So it's definitely a bit of a challenge to prioritize budget because not one plan follows the rest of the plans. And that's why I find it very important, critical to look at the bigger picture in terms of, everyone has to have priorities as well as they're doing this. When I say everyone, producer, the creative, the project manager, everyone has their own little bits that they're really looking at. So there's a lot of it to pay attention to. But the biggest one, I'll just say it's safety. Make sure everything is safe, both from a
Mhm.
mechanical side and a human factor side.
You joked during our conversation that things always look great on paper until you
Yeah.
walk the side.
Yeah.
What's the classical this worked on paper moment you experienced?
It's funny. After the cruise ships I've worked on in recent time, the past 6 years, the cruise ship industry is interesting because, they build a ship and they want to rinse, repeat, cut and paste, because that's how they're built in series of the same class. And it's not the case because you'll find a piece of steel that's moved because someone had a structural issue or a noise issue or whatever it might be. So you have to trust but verify anything that you're doing. So it is not the same. And I think the cruise ship industry, if you get a chance to do it again, that's where you get your second chance. Theme park industry, unless you're doing a bi-coastal park, the same theme land on both parks, you're pretty close, almost cut and paste. But from the cruise ship industry, it's definitely, something's will be adjusted because each time you release a ship to build, you're going to find something new that you need to adapt to or change something because of consumer demand, because of creative demand, because of operational demand as well. And so it's definitely not as easy as it sounds. And it's really not cut and paste on anything we ever do.
How much of technical direction is really problem solving on site?
If you look at technical direction and the role for a second, to solve the goal is to solve everything beforehand. If you could do that, you're really in a better shape. You're 85% successful. Behind the screen, you're still, 35 to 45% not there. I mean, the processes, like we talked about earlier in our conversation today, design assurance, hazard analysis. That one right there is the first one to really nip any potential challenges in the backside. So you can design your thing before you're actually spending money and cutting steel or cutting wire or whatever you're doing, chopping into the foundation of a building. So that's your first one right there. So that you begin to now reduce your risk. However, you look at Daha, you look at engineering, different. There you go to prototyping. Prime case and example, we had two things that we built, six, eight of those things, plus one big thing that went up and down. And they worked great in the open world. They did really well, but we put them in water and they both fell apart completely. So it's always about prototyping. And it's challenging because sometimes you just can't prototype it, period. I want to prototype a 100-yard table system. Well, good luck in that. You have to build the whole thing to scale. So back to our conversation earlier about wires and whatnot. But so you're definitely, trying to get ahead of the curve as much as you can. And that's why I rely upon specialists, engineers, control, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, HVAC, name the engineer, bring them in and try to work through it all now through that DAHA process, design assurance, hazard analysis, AHA. And that will really help out with the process because you could probably punch holes in a lot of things with those folks in the room before anybody starts cutting steel or cutting hose.
Now, why is the physical presence during build out so critical?
Oh man, it looks good on paper. Let's go for reality. Yeah, that's what it comes down to at this point. There's things that, won't work. The team will come back and say, this isn't working. And that's about 35%, 35 to 45% on site. I'm a selfish person and I like to be on site every day because you want to see it and walk it and experience it and understand it and talk to the people who are either installing it or operating it or even just commissioning it. You're always present for all those processes anyways, but it's more so to be there during the process because the more that you see it and understand it, the better and stronger you're going to be when it comes to this didn't work. Let's make a shift.
Now, as far as this didn't work, what happens, and I'm sure it happens where somebody messes up and it hurts reputation. How reputation, how important it is in this themed entertainment business?
Think, if you want to say mess up, it's not the phrase I use. I look at it as, okay, well, we miscalculated. A little more engineering speak behind it. However, it's going to happen no matter what we do in our careers. I mean, it's happened to me many times. It's happened to some of my amazing colleagues for many years. It just happens. It's how do you manage through it is the big thing right there. Okay, this happened. Did you think about plan A, B, and C? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you thought of different plans instead of what's in front of you. Okay, so let's go ahead and then figure out what do we need to do. So really the win is how do you manage through the situation? Then, oh my gosh, my reputation's ruined. That's the least of your worries. Let's get this thing delivered.
So, what advice would you give for somebody about not burning the bridges with the customers?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. It's a relationship. It's about transparency. It's about communication skill set. It's also about bringing in the right people to support you. We're all not the end of the day. I've got every solution. I don't know anybody who has that answer, but if you have people who could support you and bring those solutions to the table, that's how you not burn bridges. Resources are important. Relationships scary more than raw skill. It's not too, I mean, they're not too far apart from each other, but relationships really lead to networking, commonality, and trust. I really, right now in this phase of my career, find those relationships so powerful because everyone's looking for a relationship of who can do something for me to help out. Because, I look right now from my side as I know a person who could help out somebody with another project. That really leads to actually better career relationship and builds than I don't have anybody for you. And so by becoming a resource to then provide, connect somebody, not provide, but just connect another peer to a client really goes a long way because people don't forget that. I wrapped up a project recently where it was just about that. It's just about relationships. And that really got me into a project that's really exciting. Once again, wish I could talk about it, but that NDA comes into play. However, it's really cool though, because they'll go, well, Mike did this before. He knows somebody or, X, Y, and Z. Call him. Maybe we'll get somebody connected up. Or maybe even, ETS could do this. Fantastic. So that's what's really great about it. I mean, relationships, I find it very inspiring and uplifts because those moments you kind of go, what am I doing next? But you run into a colleague and they're doing the same thing. And next, you're having a conversation where you realize, wait, we could do something together. And that's what's really cool about it. So relationship building is important. Being involved with the associations that are within the Themed Entertainment Association and IAPA, it's just such the right way to go. It's very important to be involved with all those USITT, SETC, the list goes on. That's how you build relationships is being active in all those agencies.
You said something powerful that you want the next generation to replace you. What traits do you hope the next wave of attraction technologists brings to the table?
Yeah, I think I start off with patience. Yeah, I mean, nothing happens overnight. You might be graduating in June of 2026 and you'll land your first job as maybe an intern. That's okay. One has to start someplace. You won't be the first person after one project. It's going to take multiple projects. I'm going to say this before and again, I'm 30 years in the industry. And I just had my first official corporate director role, which to be a corporate director is not a small feat. It's actually very inspiring and good. Yes, the word technical director is a phrase that we use. You see the word producer, and you see all these other words, but those are all different based upon industry and what it is. And it's very important to continue to learn, continue to ask questions, continue your education. And that's what everyone needs to do. Don't think, all right, I've learned it all. You never do. You never will. I mean, once again, in my career pathway, which has been very exciting, I'm learning. My colleague before me, they're still learning. colleagues after me, the younger colleagues, they're still learning. That's what we need to do. But you take that and you be very pragmatic of how you approach and share that information because you don't want to show up as the know it all. That's a pretty quick dismissal from a lot of people who've been around for a while.
Is there anything about the future of the industry that genuinely concerns you right now?
I think our industry, entertainment, and I say themed entertainment as a whole, that's coasters and immersive environments and cruise ships and all of it as a whole. There's over aggressiveness, keep climbing fast. Don't be like that. Be patient, be understanding, be able to step back, step out of your comfort zone, and also apply at a certain point. You'll be able to apply some ideas, and no idea is a bad idea. Let's like no the unasked question is the bad question. So ask those, put things on the table. You might feel like a knucklehead when you bring it up on the table amongst people. However, you're thinking, and that's powerful to show that you are at least connecting to this thing. Right or wrong, we're not going to worry about that. I'd rather have somebody bring something to the table than sit there and go, gee, I wish I brought this up 6 months ago. Well, a little bit too late. It would have been cool. But that's where, as a leader, I really want to foster the open communication from people and team members. You're a contributor too. At the end of the day, it's 10 people sitting around a table. Forget the roles and titles and the paychecks. Let's look at who's contributing and what can they bring to the table because that's where you want to grow.
Yep, that's a great advice. As we getting close to wrapping up, could you leave attraction owners and future technologists with one guiding principle, something they should carry into every project? What would it be?
Yeah, I think I just foreshadowed it. How funny. I could like read your mind. It's amazing. It is this never dismiss any idea. Welcome it, deeply analyze it based upon a few following key facts and processes. How does this idea relate to the project? Secondarily, what will it take to implement this thing? What's the facility impact? Do we have to cut holes in a building? Do we need to dig in the ground? What's the schedule implications? Then you look at element design, fabrication, installation, maintenance, operability. And, I always say in this one conversation, safety is not part of this line because it's always part of any phase that we do. Safety is always number one. So I don't mention it in this spot right here. Then cost as well. You have to tear it apart. So as end of the day, the signatory towards this design change or this idea change. You want to look at all those items not quickly, but pragmatically. And once again, I rely upon our specialists to really help out to flesh it all out. We can do some quick napkin math and algebra. However, we're not going to be able to answer completely. So that's definitely where I want to go in terms of the guiding principle.
Mike, you have so much knowledge. Do you ever do like courses? Have you ever considered doing courses or educational seminars or something?
It's the passion shines and it does drive me to want to do something like that. And I look at opportunities down the road, IAPA, MTC, LEI. Um, will it happen? I would like to do it. I think it's fun. It's fun to share because all these conferences that we attend to, you know, I was that guy too when I was 18, sitting there going, give me information. And I want to be that guy to share the information with the upcoming because someday I'm going to retire, I hope. And it's all up to the upcoming generation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, thank you so much for joining us on Attractions Insights and for sharing decades of experience and hard-earned lessons from behind the scenes of this immersive entertainment world. And to everyone listening and watching, if you enjoyed this episode, read the description. There will be a link to our episode which we recorded at IAPA. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with another attraction owner or creator who needs to hear it. And until the next time, keep building experiences that people don't just visit, but remember.